All right, so
Okay,
welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed your quick lunch, and we're getting ready to start our lunch panel.
so who wants to go ahead and start? Am I supposed to moderate?
Nope, I'm the moderator. I just didn't know if you wanted to lead us in or not. So,
I'm terrible at these things.
okay, then I will get us started. Thank you, Nicole.
She's
So
like,
welcome
so
everybody. I know you'll be lunching and going in and out a little bit, but thank you for joining us. My name is Jackie Weber. I will moderate and kind of be a part of the panel as well. So this session is learning diversity to support all students. And the idea behind this, as Nicole put it together, was really this idea that as you have your students doing this storytelling, how can we as educators differentiate and include all of our learners in that process? And so today we really want to talk amongst ourselves, obviously as panel members, but we want to get you involved as well and hear your ideas for how have you built inclusivity and differentiation into your process to help all learners. And those could be lingual students with IEPs, students with disabilities, the students who demonstrate neurodivergence, any students, really even students who maybe feel like they're not strong in the STEM fields. And how can you encourage them to do storytelling and to embrace code and to take risks? So we're going to dive into that in this next hour. So we welcome you to jump in, join, share your experiences, ask questions. Anything you want to do to engage would be awesome. If you did not get a chance to see Victor Hicks yesterday in his presentation, it was amazing and gave us a great introduction into diversity. I would highly recommend you find that video when Nicole releases it. It is amazing. It was a brilliant session. So if you didn't get a chance to see that, please make sure you find that. And if you did get to see it, we're going to be building on a lot of his ideas as well today. Okay, so why does this matter? So we've talked a lot about this week, but this idea of inclusion and bringing people in, Gen Alpha, which if you were here on our first day, we talked about those are people up to about 15 years old now. And actually, those who are born right now, the itty bitties, those are the start of Gen Beta for the most part. So your students that you have up to about freshmen in high school are a part of Gen Alpha. And that's one of the most diverse kind of generations that we've had so far, according to Common Sense Media. So we, as educators, are going to be seeing much more diversity in our classroom. And as we know, as we have moved through our careers, that's become more and more important. We can no longer do the one size fits all. So let's dive into this and talk about how do we make this work. Let's do a little introduction. We're going to I'll start with Linda, if you wouldn't mind. Tell us a little about yourself and what is your lens? What lens do you bring to this conversation in education, computing, diversity?
Sure. Glad to do that. Can you hear me okay? I'm outside
We can.
finishing up my vacation.
Good
So,
for you.
yes, so I'm an arts integration specialist. Certified through the Institute for Arts Integration in STEAM. I taught public school music for 23 years and left the classroom in 2019. So I've been doing a lot of consulting. And the lens that I have as an arts integration specialist is really as a musician, doing a lot of music technology and creating and allowing students to create using music as a pathway to making connections to other subjects. And lots of people are music. Music is something that connects to everyone and everything. It'll make you dance. It'll make you sing. It'll make you happy or sad. So that's one of the ways, not just with cultural difference, but social, emotional learning as well is the lens that I look through for diversity.
That is wonderful. We'll love having your perspective here. And I too am an integrationist, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Let's meet Katie. Will you tell us a little about yourself and what lens you bring to this conversation?
Yeah, I'm Katie McNamara. I'm currently serving as a high school teacher librarian, and I also run a program for the teacher librarian credential at Fresno Pacific University, and just a few different other things of consultant work and helping people embrace the students they have in front of them. But as a teacher librarian, what's really fascinating about that is I get to see like every single student. I'm interacting with all of them through multiple different subjects, leading as the PD for the teacher in the classroom, doing curriculum design, curriculum integration, showing the new things, and just really even helping get all the kids involved, helping every single student see themselves and believe in themselves, really working on minimizing that belief gap that I think is getting worse and worse instead of easier as time has progressed.
That's great. Thank you. Sorry, I was taking a note, writing down belief gap. I love that phrase. I'm going to use that and we'll steal that from you. But I will attribute it to you. I shall not be a terrible AI person. Okay. So my name is Jackie Weber. I have been a STEM educator for almost 30 years, good grief. And I have taught, been an administrator, and have done some consultant work as well. So all three of us have that in common. Currently working at the South Carolina Governor School for Science and Mathematics. So this is a school that reaches students across the state, particularly those in rural areas who wouldn't otherwise get the opportunity that they get. So my passion, similar to Linda's, is in integration, integrative STEM. And my belief is this idea of opening access, and I love that belief gap, but opening access up. If students never get a chance to experience STEM and computer science in particular, then they never know whether or not they love it, right? And they never know whether or not they belong in it, and they'll never get that feeling of it. So for me, that idea of integrating computer science into every content area and every age is truly how we provide that access to everybody. So that's my lens coming into this conversation. So okay, so let's get into it. I'm going to start with a few questions, and the audience can just jump right in. And if it becomes a natural conversation, that'd be awesome too. But I'll just prompt us occasionally as we need it. So let's get started, panel. With here's the first question: what does learning diversity in quotes, look like in computer science and storytelling? What does learning diversity look like in those environments, computer science and storytelling? Linda, let's hear your thoughts on that.
I was looking for my mute button. So I do a lot of storytelling with music. My favorite thing to use with my students is, and I forgot to add, I had to teach English one year. And I learned so much. I love to write. I'm a writer. And so a lot of people think they can't write music. And it's like, so I put the tie together, looking at a story, listening to a story, a poem or what have you, and actually taking music, taking musical instruments, taking found sounds or what have you, and creating a soundscape and bringing things to life that way. That's one of the way that learning diversity looks like in a storytelling project. It's like, okay, so there is, like right now where I am, I'm out here in Canyon Lake, Texas, and I'm hearing the cars and stuff, but at the same time, I'm hearing all the birds and all the locusts and everything else out here. So how could my students create a scenery using sound? So that when they actually, instead of just reading it, make it come to life where they can see it, feel it, touch it, and hear it. And so for me, storytelling projects is a way to do that. Or if they have a song or something that they want to communicate, it's like the first question I ask is, okay, so who's your audience and what mood are you trying to create? And so that will shape everything else. So I see diversity in that way for storytelling projects.
Yeah, I'm a recovering English teacher, 16 years here, and it used to really be really, really hard. Like, okay, they're going to write. And then later, way later, let them go ahead and do the art. And it's like, wait, what? Sometimes that art is what gets the kids excited and will help the words to come later. And when you look at coding too, that's also an art. Like it really is. You get into it. Sorry, I'm getting a little excited about it. It is another way to like visualize art and seeing a different type of sequence, and they can like start seeing different things. And it's just another aspect of that storytelling. When I can go ahead and visualize something, now the words will come. It's not always the other way. And a lot of times really we need the visual before the words can come. So embracing it as this full like art cycle, even if you want them to do a plot outline, which I totally believe in that. Yes, yes. But does that plot outline have to be words, or could that plot outline be visuals?
That's great. And I love, Nicole, you did a great job here. We have music and we have language, and I come from the math and STEM side. And when I would do projects in class, and I had students who were artists, right? And so helping them see that the math and in the art, let them draw the design first, and then we'll figure out the math that goes with it, right? And so allowing, for me, that learning diversity is sort of what is the strength, what do students bring into my classroom with them? What are their talents? What are their interests? Obviously we have a lot of students now who are into gaming and designing games. And those are just stories, right? They're choose your own adventure stories from way back when we were kids. They're just in a digital format. And so I think you're really bringing out a student's interests and talents, allows we talked a lot yesterday about voice, allows their voice into the room. So I think allowing them to have that, you have some structure, but it's not so rigid that they can't express themselves in a way that's comfortable for them, in a way that allows them to make connections. So I think, as you can see across all of our content areas, we're kind of all saying a lot of the same things. I love that. Audience, anything anyone want to chime in about what does learning diversity look like in your classroom in CS or storytelling? Wait time. Okay, maybe that was too deep for after lunch. Let's move on to another question, and then we'll see if we can get more people involved here. So when we talk about this, we kind of talked about this broader sense. Let's talk about some more of kind of get into the nitty gritty of some practical support. So a lot of these creative tasks can be a little bit intimidating. Some people will jump right into it and they love it. But how do we break up, or what strategies have you used to break up sort of big creative tasks so that every student can get into it? So and this might be also if you have a very big, sort of very structured task, how do you break those up into smaller, more creative bits? So let's kind of flip that question around a little bit too. Of most of our projects are these giant, very structured tasks. How do we break those up so that we get more creativity in there and we invite more voice and diversity and differentiate it for all of our students? So any ideas you want to throw in there?
Yeah, so breaking up that big task is so critical. Big fan of project-based learning and the big projects, because that means like less grading, but it does not mean less support. Huge, huge, huge difference. So how do we get the kiddos to the support they need? If you got this big project, maybe you're giving them 3 weeks and like, okay, great, they got enough time to do this. And then it's the day before and you're getting nervous maybe. And then it's due and you see their stuff like, holy co-authors. Well, because we didn't have those feats of the classroom to the kid milestones. Like, yes, I need to be at this point by this day to be successful in the end. Similarly, even if they're 17-year-olds, well, shoot, me, almost gonna be 50. I need those milestones chunked out for me too. So it's that time management piece that is so hard. Like to even like being able to like visualize how long a task will take. Like, okay, let me ask you this. How many of you were late unintentionally because you really thought you could get ready faster than you did? It's like, it's that, but now let's transfer that into the classroom with these darlings. So yeah, break up that task. 30% or more of our kiddos in front of us are neurodivergent, and they really struggle with that time management breakdown and even have time disillusionment. So every little step we can do to help them, and it helps us too, because if I'm monitoring, like, when do I need to check in with a student? Like, okay, it's because they've got this milestone done, and now we can have a conversation about this thing specifically. So it's not even a gotcha thing. I'm not saying like, hey, where are you? Show me. Well, you should be at this point. No, no, no. I've pulled back the veil. Everyone knows at this point we're going to be at this spot, and I want to go ahead and check in with you to help you.
One of the things that I would do with project-based learning, like I had a composition project that I did. My students were doing songs on the types of energy, and their job was to find out, it's like, can we use music to explain the types of energy? And so they were writing different songs. I had them in different groups. I think there were 5 types. We had our main song with everything, and 2 groups made it to the end. The other 3 did not. It didn't happen. But so we focused on the group project for everyone. But I broke everything into small chunks. I did have milestones, but one thing that I found that was really successful is I have rubrics with like a checklist with a self-assessment and a teacher assessment. So it's like, here is what you're supposed to do. And then it says, did I, right, use 8 measures? Did I create a baseline? And they have to answer yes or no or what have you, or did they think they did it, to the best of their ability, their own opinion? Then the teacher would go by and kind of like agree or disagree. But doing those type of things gave them some type of accountability. And then also with the project-based learning, it's like, okay, we're in a group of 4 or a group of 3. So who brings what to the table that's strong? What's your strong point? Are you the one that's best at taking notes? Are you the one that knows how to operate the music? Are you the one that knows how to play the instruments or sing? Are you the better writer? And they normally figure that out by themselves. And sometimes as a teacher, you direct them, but allowing them to self-reflect as they go on and have that documented in some type of rubric or some type of actual physical paper that they do, or if it's, on I think I use Google Classroom because that was a while back ago when I was in a classroom, but it worked very well for those that followed it.
I like that. And there's lots of suggestions in the chat here, some about breaking things up into smaller pieces. And I think as teachers, we try to go step by step, right? Especially because you usually can't get a project done in one day, right? So you're kind of thinking about it in parts. Have you ever found that sort of squashes creativity when you have a lot of steps that people need to follow and sort of, things that we tend to do with rubrics and stuff like that? How do you feel about that? Does it limit a student's creativity or sort of disconnect with some of our diverse learners?
I feel like there's sub pieces there too. So I'm going to attack the rubric part first. Okay. I'm a big fan of the single point rubric, and I saw a huge uptake in creativity and just stick-to-itiveness, if that's a word, but it is now. When I went to the single point rubric. So just real briefly with that. The big like 4 table rubric thing, it confuses a lot of people. And then there's usually adjectives in there like did this exceedingly well. Well, what in the world does that mean? Like, no, but if we can go ahead and step away, and this is like the English background because I love math. I don't know how I became an English teacher, but like math makes so much more sense. So like, wait a minute, all of this like wishy-washy subjectivity, how does that help a student? Like, I still don't know. If you have ideas, please share how that helps. Anyhow, if I can make it as holistic as possible, X exists. X was done. It doesn't matter that it was done wishy-washy. It doesn't matter if it was done so good, exceedingly well, if it impressed me, but no, you did this task. And once I went ahead and shifted to that, it was very clear for the student, okay, if I just do this thing, I'm getting my full points basically. And if it's not done, I'm still able to like cross-reference with the rubric. Like, okay, this wasn't done. Now I know how I need to really teach that student because I'm not living in the sea of gray with them. And so once they can get rid of the stress of the grade, that's when their creativity increases because they know like it's all open. I'm not putting all of these weird ceilings and all these concerns with them.
Once I did a project with, we did songwriting. I had between third, fourth, and fifth grade, I had about 85 kids who chose, I was at an arts academy, chose to be in music class. And so I decided for our Black History program that I was not going to teach them a song to perform. I said, you're going to write your own song. And they're like, what? I'm like, yes. And so I did start off with some type of rubric that I had in my mind, but I kind of led the class along, and we did a lot of brainstorming. We did summarization. But what happened was my first period class would have written one verse. My second period class would come behind, and guess what? We're continuing the writing process. They're doing a revision. So we're singing the song, we're playing there. So that word doesn't quite go there. So by the time the next day comes and that first period has come back, it's been refined, but it's been done by everyone else, and we're doing it as a group. And a lot of times you have to model it first. You have to do it as a group, and then you can let them loose on their own. I have to put a lot of rails up, because if you say here's GarageBand, here's Logic Pro, here's whatever type of digital audio workstation, they just start pressing buttons and they just start throwing everything together. So I always have to give them some type of rails to get them started. And then once they have started, and once we've done something together as a group, and then I let go little by little, and then they're doing amazing, and they're actually doing some amazing things even there when once I give them those parameters, because they do have the opportunity to explore. So there's a danger in just letting them just go. I think that sometimes you end up with, I don't know how I want to say, you want it to be like a nice stew where you have everything all mixed up and turned together, but you don't want to have like too many ingredients and it's just too much. And that's the best analogy I can give.
I like that. That's great. So the question that we're discussing right now has kind of exploded the chat, which I love. So I was going to share a couple of things. Actually, Amy Murphy, do you want to jump in? Because you have shared a few ideas here that I think really is a kind of attributes to this loose, tight kind of question. Are you willing to jump in and chat with us?
Yeah, I'm not an expert, so I'm just going to put that out there right away. But where exactly do you want me to share? I threw a couple
well,
things
your
out
idea
there. Was it
about
the
constraint breeds
constraint?
creativity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're a PBL school, project-based learning school, design thinking school. And so one of the things that has come from my years of teaching there is I'm a big thinker and a big dreamer. And that's why I'm kind of finding this AI from yesterday really exciting for me, because I can go with the big idea and then AI can just, like outline it for me and do all the little tiny details. That's fine. But one of the things that I always hear people say to me is, well, we can't do that because, or we can't do that because, or we can't do that. So I just feel like every time I have this big idea, and I feel like the kids are the same way, we're always saying, no, well, we can't do that because. So I started shifting my mindset and saying, okay, well, here's what I can do within those constraints. And so I started saying to my kids, hey, constraint breeds creativity. It's like that old, necessity is the mother of invention, right? Constraint breeds creativity. So what can we do inside of these constraints that we're being given? And I find that the kids, they're middle school kids. 7th grade is my jam, right? So the middle school kids love a challenge. Anytime you tell them no, they're going to come back at you. So, okay, here's your constraints. What can you do inside that challenge or inside those 4 walls? And we find that the walls kind of shift into a circle. So it's kind of fun. I don't know if that answers the question or just kind of explains what my saying was.
Yeah, no, I just think I just like all the different perspectives that are being shared right now. Because at first we're talking about all the different ways to break it up and to make it structured. And now, just how do we also manage to keep it creative within those constraints? And Nicole, you made a comment here that, like all art, all coding, everything that you will do in the real world, so to speak, has constraints on it, right? Projects have constraints. there's budgets, there's audiences, there's preferences, things like that. So that's a really great point, that we're also sort of career readinessing them, right? Considering making up words here, I'm going to make that one up. So we're getting them ready for careers by also showing them that we do have to work within these constraints, which I think is great.
I think that also brings them back to the design
The
thinking
constraints are a
process.
bit of a safety net too.
For sure.
I'm just
So-
gonna
I
jump
was
in.
just saying it brings them back into that design thinking process. Sorry, Linda. And it just kind of trains them to think, well, okay, who's my client? What do they need? And what can I give them within the boundaries that I'm confined to? And if you tackle every problem with that, you're always having the empathy piece, you're always having the creativity piece, and you're always keeping on that path of refining what we're doing, but you're bringing in any different tool that you need, whether it's music, whether it's science, whether it's coding, whether it's writing, it doesn't matter. You're tying all those things in together. It's very cyclical and spirally delicious.
I was just gonna say, I may be going off a tangent here, but it just made me think this. In life, just like these are life skills that you're teaching, but think about all the different backgrounds that your students are coming from within their own homes, within their own culture, within their socioeconomic, everything. They have some constraints because everybody doesn't have everything. Everybody doesn't have access to everything. And in doing those, you have to learn to work within those constraints, whether they be familial with your family, whether they be by society, whether it be in the community that you live in. I mean, if you live in the desert, then you don't have certain things. If you live near water, there's certain things that you have. It's just, it doesn't matter. That is an actual life skill. And I think that's why so many people get to be creative, because it's like, I have to work with what I have. I started out with playing the piano on a piece of cardboard. I didn't have a piano. That was October, November. I think about 4 months. I had a piece of cardboard. My mom drew the piano keys labeled middle C, and I practiced on this thing, not getting any noise, until Santa Claus brought me a piano for Christmas. But guess what happened? I became made me read. I'm placing my fingers where I need to place them. I'm counting. I'm saying everything out loud, and I only got to touch a piano once a week. There are teachers who will not take people if they don't have a piano already. But what if mine was like that? I became a better musician because I worked within the constraints that I had until I could get what I had that I needed to practice.
That reminds me of a conversation that happened 2 days ago, I think. It was here, this idea that, we're talking a lot about tech and we're, computer science, but computer science doesn't have to happen with technology in front of you. Like computational thinking can do a lot of computational thinking without a single piece of technology around you. And I think that is a great way of diversifying for your students as well. It's not every student can sit in front of a computer screen, right? I mean, some students need to be up and moving. They need to have their hands on things. They need to be building and making things. And that can still be computer science, or, still is creativity, even if there's not they can use pseudocode that came up yesterday, and create the flow charts to plan it before they even touch a computer. So thank you, Linda. That's a really great idea for diversifying, is allowing these different modalities to come out in your classroom. Even if you have tech in front of them, give them an opportunity to do a little old school, right? Sometimes that works really nicely as well. Thank you. Well, does anyone else have any other comments you want to jump in, throw in on this topic? Otherwise, we might go to our next question. I'm loving this conversation, though. This is so nice. Okay. Lost my place here. Here we go. So Linda, you'll love this one. How does integrating visual arts, music, or drama give students multiple pathways of showing what they know?
It just does, because you have some students that draw. You have some students that are musical, they have to hear it. And then we have the ones that have to just act things out. So when you are allowed to put those things into coding or storytelling, those are all different access points. And just like Katie said, I think she said 7th grade is my jam. It's like, what is your jam? What is it that motivates you? When you have something that motivates you, then you want to learn. But not only that, especially when you have students working in different groups, or even if they're not working in groups, if they're presenting to the class, it presents a different perspective of the same thing. It's like, let's take the same project and let's see if we do present it in this particular art form, what would it look like versus art, versus theater, versus music, or even combining them all together.
Absolutely. And I love, again, this idea of integration and allowing them, what is their jam? How are they interested in expressing themselves? And by helping them make those connections to what they're interested in, then they get a really deep understanding of the content, right? Because they're approaching it from their point of view, their interest area, what they already have all this background knowledge, they're making those connections to the things that they love. And that's what makes things stay. Sir Ken Robinson, the late Sir Ken Robinson, wrote the book, The Element, which is one of my absolute favorite books because it, he also has TED Talks out there, if you're a TED Talk person, but he really talks about how we should really focus on what the students are really passionate about. They need all of this other information to be able to build that, to build things, but allow them to focus on what they're really good at. And I think you really nailed it. What is your jam? What's their access point? I like that. I also wrote down your language there. What is their access point for whatever this content is that you're learning, right? And so, like computer science, there are so many access points into computer science, right? So you could be creating a greeting card for your grandparents. You could be creating a video game. You could be creating, all of these other projects that we've been working on all week, right? So that idea of computer science is not just this layers and layers and layers dense text, right? There's so much creativity into it. And I think that there's that connection to it through, showing all of the different ways that there are computer sciences in visual arts, computer sciences in music, and vice versa. Right. And all of the computer science that is now in Hollywood, right? The drama, the theater, all of the computer science that goes into the lighting and the backgrounds and all of that. I think that, that's a great way of making those connections for students so they can bring their interest into these other contents, and particularly with this computer science in particular. Welcome back, Katie. All right. Yeah, sorry, I was just reading our chat to see if there's anything we wanted to share out. Some great ideas. So make sure you're reading those chats. So we've been talking a lot about storytelling this week, right? And so how can storytelling be a bridge for students who might struggle with a traditional coding kind of idea? We've looked at a lot of these examples. So I think everybody who's on this call right now should be able to chime in here. But how can you bring storytelling out to bridge content and traditional ideas to your students who might have diverse needs?
We remember things with stories, and that's really key to keep in track for ourselves too. When we tell a story, we get the sequence going, all of these minutia of details, which are like a plethora of standards too. It empowers all the way around. So as instructional side, that story helps us recall, remember, and then also from the flip side, of a student is creating within a story, they have to really, really, really understand their topic. And so many layers of dynamics, interactions between people, consequences of actions, discussion of whether it's the dialogue that has to really lead the storytelling, or if it's the setting that does. So there's so much extra neat stuff happening, and the different types of the brain that are firing off, and we can go ahead and cross that plane. We got right brain and left brain working. That then it's, I don't know, we all just tend to get a little bit more excited, but we don't understand the science behind it. And you don't have to understand the science, but bringing the storytelling in just helps for all those reasons and more.
Well, and they get to see themselves in it, right? So they can create characters that are like them, or like people that they know, or characters they feel are the opposite of them. They can build themselves into it, right? And so they get to see themselves in these scenarios. And how do they, how can okay, my teacher gave me this assignment with, this box, right? And how can I be creative within that box? And I think it gives that opportunity for them to really open up their minds, think back to their own life experiences or something else that they've read or seen, and kind of bring that all together for them. It makes it real. It makes it really realistic for them, which is awesome.
Yeah, I'm seeing the notation too about speech bubbles. So when we think about storytelling too, we had a speaker talking about graphic novels. That's a thing too. We want everyone to be these research experts, but no one wants to read and grade a research paper. Totally understand that. So could it be a story is their end product based on their research? Could it be a graphic novel? Totally. There's an assignment I love doing. We look at current events and take the new learning and create graphic novels with it. That's another way of getting a better understanding of things. And narrative nonfiction, it's a genre on purpose that people of all ages are loving. So if we can just embrace that some more, it kind of empowers, not kind of, it does empower our students to create stuff for this diverse world as well.
Obviously it works, right? Or nobody would be watching those true crime dramas that we all binge on streaming media, right? So people love those stories. I love that. And so just share a couple of comments here. Amy Murphy says, I think one of the most important things that I can do with my kids is to give them purpose for learning the content. And again, making that relevant. It's not just you have to do this worksheet of math problems, right? You're making it relevant to them. And then Paige says, lets our students shine. Everyone's able to put themselves in the stories, which is wonderful. As they choose their own backgrounds and images, they're adding text and speech bubbles, and they're expressing themselves in their own lingo. I love that too. Magnificent. Does anyone else want to chime in with some ideas about this topic of storytelling and how it helps us differentiate or include some of our students? Think a little bit about, think back to maybe some of your classrooms or some of your students or some of the adults that you work with if you're a professional developer. Not everyone wants to chime in orally, right? Not everyone is comfortable, like right now, that people aren't jumping in to talk necessarily. But if you give them that chance to write their own story, they will engage on their own, right? On their own notepad, on their own computer. They're thinking about that thing on their own. And so they're connecting it to themselves, even if they're not sharing it out. And I think some of our students are the same way. They may not be the one in the back of the room jumping up and down and raising their hands, but they're processing it, right? Because they get to relate to themselves. So that's a great connection. Thank you for that. Anything else? All right. So let's look at our next question then. So this one is around equity and representation. This is a great question for Mr. Hicks, who was with us yesterday. How do we ensure our stories, characters, and examples reflect the cultures and identities of our students?
A big responsibility when we're doing a unit is do a diversity check of the materials you're bringing in. Like really I look at them. Who's speaking? What are they speaking about? No matter how diverse a set of information is, there's always a group that's being left out. So go ahead and look at it with that lens. Not saying that we all are doing horrible jobs. Absolutely not. Like it's impossible to have every single thing represented, but being really mindful that it's as diverse as we can, that makes sense with the content we're trying to cover, as well as the people in front of us. And being mindful too, it's not just the people that are in front of us. Like if we only have 2 races in front of us, it doesn't mean to discount the others. So still bringing in the windows and the mirrors concept, but not just in the free reading. We hear that a lot with fiction that they're reading, but even with our content that we bring in, nonfiction of teaching a standard, who's telling the story behind what we're trying to teach?
One of the things that I just recently did a event talking about storytelling through song, bringing history to life. And of course, we talked about the writing process, but we were even using songs. We referred to Bob Marley's song, Get Up, Stand Up. And there's a line in there that says, it talks about history. It says half the story has never been told. And what we did with the people who are in our workshop, we're like, okay, so here's the scenario. This is what happened. Now you have to explain yourself. And so go ahead and tell the story. And then we made them like, how do you explain? I think it was something like you were in the workroom and you spilled some glitter and you're like, oh my goodness, I have to get it. And then the fan makes the glitter go everywhere. And then you realize, oh my gosh, I got to pick up my kid from daycare. I'm just going to go. And then the next day, everybody's talking about the glitter incident. And they're like, weren't you the last one in the copy room? I was like, yeah. And well, what had happened was, so we had everybody to say, and it's like, so did you tell the whole truth? Did you try to make yourself look good? Did you make really good excuses? Did you leave out key details? What did you do? Because Winston Churchill also said, history will be kind to me, for I will write it myself, right? So we're looking at who, and then we start talking about that. So when we start looking at history and just everything and how things are being told and the stories and the perspective. So now it's like, okay, let's look at this here. Whose perspective was it from? If it was written from a different perspective of someone that you didn't hear, who was that missing voice? Now what would it be like? And have students to write stories from those things. So what we do, me and my partner, Charles McCampbell, we write songs about people that people may not know. And so our main idea is in the chorus, in the hook, and then our supporting details are in the verses from that person's point of view. And kids seem to like that because they're like, oh, you know what? I hadn't thought about this person that's not involved in the story. And so having kids to write their own stories, they get to have their own voices too.
Thank you. And you know, language arts, music that tends to, in history, even people tend to feel that it's a humanity, right? So those of us on the call here who are STEM teachers, right? So math, people tend to think of math as a very cold place, right? The classroom is all just the facts, ma'am, right? Like it's just numbers. So how, if you are a STEM teacher on this call, so how are ways that you bring in the diversity of the cultures that are in your room? I have a few ideas I can share, but I want to open it up to the rest of to any of you who are on the call of, you know, how do we take some of these STEM classes or some of the content areas that maybe don't lend themselves to creative writing, expressiveness? How do you bring in that kind of cultural awareness and inclusivity and allow the students' identities to come out? Share any of the ideas that you have.
That's a lot of questions in one. I would stick with the first bit. How do we get that creativity in? Even something that seems so like just lockstep in facts, like you can take those facts and make a series of memes about them. There's some creativity, and we see that all the time in the social media feeds, and that's what our kids are seeing too. So bonus there, once our students create content within something that they're consuming constantly, when you go behind the scenes and you start creating with it, it now has less control over you. So if you might think, oh, these memes are like factual news all the time, but you start making it like, oh, wait, people can go ahead and just so easily have it say whatever. It lowers the power of that manipulation on you. And the flip side, when you're making a meme, like there's creativity going on. They're still getting their content. They're having to really synthesize and summarize down to what's really, really, really important. And the biggest bonus, like it takes seconds for the teacher to grade.
Cool idea. What else do we have out there for STEM teachers who brought in some culture and identity and how students can express themselves? Well, this reminds me a little bit, I'll share one of my experiences before AI, but reminds me of the conversation about AI yesterday, is creating questions or assignments that are open-ended enough where students can bring in their own culture. So for instance, when I was teaching high school math, we were looking at graphs and studying the different shapes of graphs can be incredibly boring. But what I allowed them to do is use all of the different equations and all of the different shapes that we had, and design. They could design a stained glass window, they could design a mosaic, they could design different things. And so what I found was that allowed their creativity to come out and their own cultures to come out. And so you could kind of see those that had more of a Latin culture background. I saw a lot more mosaics, and I saw a lot more sort of geometric shapes. And those who had more of a Middle Eastern culture, we saw a lot more sort of movement in the shapes and the designs that they created. And so it was really fascinating to see, because they had to use one of each kind of equation and each kind of shape, but that was it. And they could do it in any way, shape, or form. And so that was one way to take what could have been a very cold assignment and open it up to their creativity and allow sort of their identities to come through. And so just, that same idea is giving them something that AI doesn't write, it's harder for them to do. There's critical thinking, there's personal connection to it. So the same thing with all these other assignments, that, figure out a way to write an assignment that allows their personal identity to come through and their creativity. And that, so even in subjects that feel a little bit more structured or more cold, you can allow that to come through. Let's see if there's anything in the chat on this question. Let's see. Find a way to measure something that adds math and apply it to a project in a different content area. Absolutely. Allowing them to edit their own sprites or characters within their story in Scratch or in elementary, or anything that they're doing to allow them to make it look like them, or make it look like another character and how they define their character. That's a great idea. And again, make it open-ended. Excellent. Excellent. All right. So we have about 10 minutes left. So let's do one more question, and then we'll see if there's any other general comments that you want to do. So our last question then is, how do we as fellow educators build in risk-taking and growth mindsets within our colleagues? So maybe think about a hesitant or resistant fellow educator, right? What are some of the things that you've done to build in risk-taking and growth mindsets in your colleagues?
So I'm leveraged at a unique position. I'm talking to a colleague, and you can tell when they're like, oh my gosh, that sounds so bonkers. I'm not doing it. They just envision all the chaos happening in their classrooms. Like, no, I've got to be in control. I know one warning sign that a teacher is like really afraid about creativity is that their classrooms are set up in rows. Anyhow, so as the teacher librarian, I can go ahead, like, hey, let me go ahead and work with your class. I do all the work there, get the lesson figured out. What are you working on right now? Make this cool thing. I love leading with like an escape room. And I can watch the kiddos as they come into my classroom. Like, okay, the ones that's bouncing off the wall most, usually it's a boy thing. That's okay. I'm a boy mom. We need boys. They're important. I'm like, yes, they're going to be the ones that do the absolute best with this activity. Come in, get them started. They're doing all this creativity, thinking, problem solving, and they're on task. They're paying attention. The teacher's like, oh my gosh, I never thought they would do this. Like, I know I've been talking to you about this for years. That's why I just decided to do it for you. But the teacher has that chance to be reflective and watching their students. So I say all that to like promise, like it doesn't always go perfect the first time. Like you're going to try something a little out of your comfort zone. Maybe it's a collaboration activity, like, oh, they couldn't handle it, so we moved the desk back to rows. Well, how much did you try? Well, I did it this one time. Okay, that's the problem, especially when we're at secondary. These students have been trained sometimes like they don't know how to behave. And so when they're given these extra parameters to like engage with each other, they're like, well, it's like, this first moment time. So I just want to like preface too that the creativity, doing the non-traditional assignments, that's where more students shine. And like the boys that were walking in, they're usually not doing well in the basic tasks that were happening in the classroom. But bam, they were able to shine doing something with different types of thinking. So thinking about it a little bit more that way, okay, I've got to like retrain these darlings. And if you're in secondary, middle school especially, it's a bunch of feral cats. We've got to work with them. We want to have fun.
One of the things I think is your question was about encouraging your colleagues, right? And sometimes it's just getting them to try strategies, not the full-blown lesson, but a strategy. One time in a training session I did a see, think, wonder combined with a Tableau, because they're cool with see, think, wonder. What do you see? What do you think? It's like a KWL, right? But it's a little more artsy, right? So it's what do you see in the picture? And it was a picture, and I had blotted out the words. It was from a book. The whole idea is, what do you think happens next, right? And we do that to the kids. It's like, what do you think this book is about by looking at the picture? So it's like, what do you see in the picture? And they're working in groups. What do you think is going on from what you see in the picture? And what do you wonder? Okay, so what do you wonder is happening? So like now I want you to take a Tableau and discuss in your group what's going to happen next. And then you do the Tableau, you discuss, you talk about it, you get in your frozen, your frozen pose, and then everybody looks and we're trying to guess what's going on. And then they'll tell us. And it may be 3 or 4 different groups. And then I let them read the story and they're like, oh, that was not what happened. Right? Nobody gets it right. But the whole idea was they got to think, and it's like there's really no wrong answer, but this is what happened in the book. But once they start experiencing it and doing those strategies themselves in like a training session, they're like the kids too. They are worse than the kids. Actually, it's a whole lot of fun and laughter and giggling and everything. But that has been the easiest segue to just having the opportunity just to work with them, if not for 30 minutes, just to show them and let them experience it. So then they'll realize it is something they can do.
Absolutely, Linda. I love that strategy. The, sort of having the teachers take their place as students and experiencing that strategy. That's super effective. Really nice. Thank you for bringing that up. I think it's also, some great ideas in the chat. Offer to co-plan or co-teach with them. Again, giving the teachers permission to fail, which a lot of teachers will not allow themselves. We have this idea that we have to know everything. We have to be in control of our classroom because that's what that's what we're graded on as teachers. And so giving them that permission to what, I want you to try this. And if it is a catastrophic train wreck, that's okay. Right. We'll talk about why and how you could do it again. And I think you really hit on it too. That idea of Katie, that they just the teachers also have to practice. Right? Like the teachers may not be comfortable with having this sort of organized chaos in their classrooms. And so not only do the students have to be trained on how to behave in that environment, the teachers do too. And so also welcoming, inviting the teachers to try again. You have to keep practicing that and then it will become better. You'll set up those parameters and then both you and the students will know how to behave in this environment. So that's a really good recommendation as well, Katie. Thank you. So Luana was sharing that she had a hard fail during an observation and had to pivot on the spot, right? And then, however that comes through, right? That's how you get. Luana, do you want to tell us about that, or are you being chat only shy right now?
I was working with my creative writing class at the time, and we were peer reviewing each other's work, but I was having them rotate through each person's computer. So each person had their computer up with their essay on it, and then they were just sort of rotating through and answering questions in the comment section. And basically they had where do I go? What am I doing? What is happening? So I had to okay, pause, because everyone was super confused. They had no idea where they were going, what they were writing. I was like, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go to the computer next to you, and I want you to answer this question. So I had to stop and do it very step by step, instead of, of course, I had the directions on the board and all that kind of thing. And I tried to give them a little more freedom about, where they wanted to go or whose story they wanted to read, but that just wasn't working for them. So I was like, all right, let me make this a little more structured for them. And it worked much better after that. So yeah, there was my principal sitting over there taking notes on me. So
And probably noting how responsive you were to student needs, because that's really what that was about at that point. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, it is. teacher learning is just as messy as student learning sometimes. So, but the more you probably now, the more you've practiced that idea of sort of being creative and having students do that, the better they are at doing it, right? Because they're getting used to that idea of, oh, I'm allowed to move around. I'm allowed to give my opinion. I'm allowed to talk. Once students get used to that, then they do it better as well. Panel members, Linda, Katie, any last thoughts that you want to leave us with about this idea of learning diversity and how we support all of our students in their developing creative and ideas?
I just want to, I don't have the right word for this. Anyhow, moving on. Sometimes we get like overwhelmed because we hear that we need to teach with diversity, and sometimes the messaging can be like, I absolutely know, never, ever. Sorry, I'm at a motel situation. Internet, please. Okay, I think we're good now. That is never ever the expectation on you. But to flip it, we can't just have one plan of attack. Any of you that have ever dealt with two children, maybe you live with these creature things. The same thing does not, maybe like, oh my gosh, this other one has the same mom and dad. What is happening? Okay, so then you get to see if you're 30, if you're lucky, maybe 40 students, having that wiggle room for them to just kind of like pick and choose a little bit, still those safety parameters, because that's a language of love, really giving them that safety net, but more than one way to go ahead and tackle this thing to where we're not just acknowledging one area of diversity, it's multiple areas of diversity with their learning needs. And I want to throw the last bit at is you have more people with learning needs than you realize, because not everyone has access to medical insurance. Not everyone is getting those diagnoses and getting the paperwork. So if we lead kind of with that lens, that more students need this help. And then the bonus there is everything that works for students that have those various learning needs or are neurodivergent, it also works for the neurotypical kiddos.
I have two things. One is always make sure that it's student-centered learning, not teacher-centered learning. And if you do it right, next thing you know, you're walking around and you're facilitating your learning. And the kids are you're just there just to kind of keep things going, making sure nothing goes off the rails too bad. And that's when you know you've made success as far as addressing all the needs of the students. But then lastly, and most importantly, always self-reflect. Remember that one class or that one teacher or that one subject, whatever your struggle was, because everybody is not a genius in everything, right? You have your strong points. So what is that one class? Where is that one place, thinking back, whether it was in college, high school, elementary, wherever it was, middle school, where you were like, you were so lost, but you knew you got it, but you just felt like this is not working for me. And keep that in mind so that you remember you have a student like that in your class. And how can you make sure that that student doesn't feel the way that you did?
Excellent points. Thank you. And I would just reiterate, know your students, right? Know what they're interested in, know what their talents are, and how do you, really think creatively about how can you build tasks and assignments and activities for them that allow those interests to shine through so that they can make those relevant connections to your content, whatever your content is, through their interests and talents. That would be my number one kind of go-to strategy for you. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Katie and Linda, for your sharing your ideas with us. And I'm going to turn it back over to Nicole.